Hello and welcome to Lesson 1 of Focal Area 3. I'm excited to have you here. Over the past two focal areas, you have learned about the 14 characteristics of science and how to design scientific projects. You have learned that science is systematic, science is empirical, objective, and replicable. But here is the thing. Science isn't just something that happens in the laboratories or in textbooks. Science is happening all around you every single day. It is happening in farms where farmers are growing crops. It is happening in hospitals where doctors are treating patients. It is happening in factories where products are being manufactured. It is happening in schools where teachers are helping students learn. It is happening in your home when you cook, clean, or make health decisions. In this focal area, we are going to discover how the scientific characteristics you have learned about are applied in real world situations. We are going to see how scientific thinking solves practical problems in agriculture, in health, in industry, in education, and at home. So by the end of this focal area, you will understand that science is everywhere, and you'll be able to recognize and apply scientific thinking to solve problems in your own community. This is really exciting because you are going to see that the science you are learning is not just for exams, it is for life. It is for solving real problems. It is for making a difference in your community. So let's get started on this exciting journey. Let me start by asking, what is applied science? Well, applied science is using scientific knowledge to solve practical problems in the real world. It is the bridge between pure science, which is about understanding how things work, and practical application, which is about using the understanding to make life better. Think about it this way. In focal area 1, you learn about characteristics of science. You learn that science is empirical, objective, methodical, replicable, and verifiable. Those are the foundations of science. In focal area 2, you learn how to design scientific projects. You learn how to ask research questions, formulate hypotheses, identify variables, and conduct experiments. Those are the tools for science. Now, in focal area 3, we are going to see how these foundations and tools are used to solve real problems. We are going to see how farmers use scientific thinking to grow better crops. We are going to see how doctors use scientific thinking to treat diseases. We are going to see how engineers use scientific thinking to build better products. We are going to see how teachers use scientific thinking to help students learn. Applied science is everywhere. It is in the food you eat, the medicine you take, the clothes you wear, the buildings you live in, and the education you receive. When you understand applied science, you start to see the world differently. You start to recognize that science is not just something that happens in the laboratories. Science is happening all around you every single day. And when you understand how science is applied, you can use scientific thinking to solve problems in your own life and in your community. This is the power of applied science. Let me tell you about one of the most important applications of science in agriculture, that is crop breeding. Now, crop breeding is the process of selecting and breeding plants with desirable traits to produce improved varieties. This is a perfect example of how scientific characteristics are applied in the real world. Let me walk you through how it works. First, breeders use observation. They carefully study different crop types. They look at characteristics like growth rate, yield potential, resistance to pests and diseases, nutritional value, and physical features like color, size, and shape. They are looking for plants that have the traits they want to improve. They observe carefully and systematically. Second, they gather empirical evidence. They take measurements, they measure plant height, they weigh fruits or seeds, they test disease resistance, they analyze nutritional content, they collect data. This is the empirical characteristics of science, that is basing conclusions on actual measurements and observations, not guesses. They don't just say this plant looks good. They measure it, they test it, they gather evidence. Third, they use a systematic approach. The crossbreed selected plants. They crossbreed the selected plant. They track the traits of the offspring. They record results over multiple generations. They follow a methodical process. This is the methodical characteristics of science by following clear step-by-step procedures. They do not just randomly breed plants, they have a plan. They follow it carefully. Fourth, they use replication. They repeat successful breeding programs. They verify results through multiple trials. They have other breeders repeat their work. This is the replicable characteristics of science, that is being able to repeat experiments and get similar results. What is the real world impact? Well, crop breeding has led to the development of drought resistant maize that can survive with less water. It has led to disease resistant cassava that can resist common diseases. It has led to high yield rice that produces more food per plant. It has even led to nutritionally enhanced crops like golden rice that has added vitamin A. These improvements have increased food security, improved nutrition, reduced crop losses, and made farming more sustainable. This is applied science at its best. Scientists are using scientific characteristics to solve real problems and improve people's lives. When you eat rice or cassava or maize, you are benefiting from crop breeding. You are benefiting from applied science. Now, let me tell you about another important application of science in agriculture, that is fertilizer application. Fertilizer is a substance added to soil to provide nutrients for plants. But how do farmers know how much fertilizer to use? How do they know which type of fertilizer is best? They use science. Here's how it works. First, scientists gather data. They collect information on plant growth rate. They test soil nutrient content. They measure soil pH and moisture. They record environmental conditions. They track crop yields. They are collecting empirical evidence by actual measurements and observations. They don't just guess, they measure, they test, they record. Second, they use accuracy and precision. They use standardized soil testing methods. They take measurements carefully. They record exact values. This ensures that their results are reliable and reproducible. If another scientist uses the same methods, they should get similar results. This is the replicable characteristics of science. Third, they conduct controlled experiments. They test different fertilizer types. But here is the key. They keep other variables constant. They use the same crop variety. They use the same soil type. They use the same environmental conditions. They apply the same amount of fertilizer. The only thing that is different is the type of fertilizer. This is a fair test. This is the controlled experimentation characteristics of science. If they change multiple variables at once, they wouldn't know which variable caused the difference. Fourth, they analyze the data. They look for patterns. They identify which fertilizer type produces the best results. They predict the optimal amount of fertilizer. They make evidence-based recommendations. They don't just they use data. What is the real world impact? Well, this scientific approach helps determine suitable NPK ratios, that is nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, for different crops. It helps calculate the right amount of fertilizer for specific soils. It helps optimize application timing. It helps reduce excess fertilizer use, which lowers cost and protects the environment. The overall impact is increased crop productivity, reduced cost for farmers, environmental protection, and more sustainable agriculture. This is how science improves farming. This is how science solves real problems. Let me tell you about pest and disease management in agriculture. This is another strong example of applying scientific methods to protect crops. Pests and diseases can destroy entire crops if not managed properly. So, how do farmers protect their crops? They use science. Here is how it works. First, scientists use hypothesis testing. They develop and evaluate predictions about the effectiveness of different crop or different control strategies. For example, they might hypothesize that using ladybugs to control aphids will be more effective than using chemical pesticides. They test this hypothesis. They compare the results. Second, they conduct controlled trials. They compare methods such as biological control using natural predators, chemical pesticides, integrated pest management, and crop rotation. But they do this systematically. They test one method in one area and another method in another area. They keep other variables constant. They compare the results. And third, they use observation and monitoring. This is really important. Pest populations and diseases spread are carefully tracked to assess treatment and effectiveness and environmental impacts. They don't just apply a treatment and hope it works. They have to monitor, they observe, they measure, they collect data. And fourth, they use cumulative knowledge. They build on previous research. They document best practices. They share findings with farmers for continuous improvement. They don't start from scratch every time. They learn from past experiences. They improve over time. What is the real world impact? Well, these approaches, including using ladybugs to control aphids, this is biological control. It is natural, it is effective, it doesn't harm the environment. They include rotating crops to reduce soil-borne diseases. If you plant the same crop in the same place year after year, diseases build up in the soil. But if you rotate crops, you break the disease cycle. They include timing pesticide applications for maximum impact. Instead of spraying pesticides all the time, they spray at the right time when pests are most vulnerable. They include monitoring levels to guide interventions. They don't spray unless necessary. They monitor, they decide, they act. The overall impact is reduce crop losses. You're going to get healthier plants. You're going to get decreased reliance on chemicals and more sustainable farming practices. This is how science protects crops. This is how science improves agriculture. Let's summarize what we have learned in this lesson. Applied science uses scientific knowledge to solve practical problems. It is not about just understanding how things work. It is about using that understanding to make life better. Crop breeding uses observation and systematic selection to develop improved plant varieties. Farmers and scientists observe plants carefully. They select plants with desirable traits. They breed them together. They track the results. They repeat the process. Over time, they develop better varieties. Fertilizer application is based on data and analysis. Scientists don't just guess how much fertilizer to use. They gather data. They test different amounts. They analyze the results. They make recommendations based on evidence. Now, pest management uses scientific methods to protect crops. Scientists test different control strategies. They monitor results. They use the most effective methods. They protect crops while protecting the environment. Now, before we move on to lesson 2 of focal area 3, I want you to think about these reflection questions. 1. How do farmers use scientific characteristics to improve crops? So think about crop breeding and fertilizer application. What scientific characteristics are they using? 2. Why is accuracy important in agriculture? What would happen if measurements weren't accurate? 3. How does scientific thinking improve farming? Think about how farmers make decisions. In Lesson 2 of Focal Area 3, we learn about how science is applied in health and medicine. We will see how doctors use scientific thinking to treat diseases. We will see how scientists develop new medicines. So get ready for Lesson 2.